Alrighty, let's talk about how to organize stuff on a page in Figma. So there's several ways to organize items. At the highest level, we have sections, which to make a section, you can either do Shift S, or you can go up here and there's section right here under this little frame icon. But obviously I opt for the macros because it's quicker. Sections are really for organizing the more high level things. It could be iterations of a workflow you're working on, or maybe different alternatives, but typically sections will have several screens or elements inside of them. Just to demonstrate with these four boxes here, I just did Shift S and I can expand this section over here. There we are. Now these all belong to the same section. Scaling the section will not scale the items within a section, but if you move a section, it will move the elements inside of that section. And you can name the section and change the fill color or add a stroke or change the stroke to that section as well. Then there's sort of the simplest way of, well, grouping items together, for lack of a better term, which is to group. That can be done by clicking on the little Figma menu, object, group selection. Oh, if I had deselected, here, let me try that again. You can see it here, or the quicker way, Command G. And these sections are all grouped. These can be named, but inside of the layers panel, because the groups do not show a name on top of it like they do section or any of the other options that I will show after that. But like I said, group's sort of the simplest and most straightforward. It sets the same rules to everything inside of a group. So when you resize it, it just resizes everything in the same way. There's no adjusting of positioning or how things scale inside of a group. And they're probably, for me at least, the least common use case, just because of they're only useful in like pretty specific circumstances. Now, as we go over, there is framing. Frame you can do here, or just the main button there, or Command Option G. I believe on a Windows computer it would be maybe Control Alt G, but that's a guess since I'm a Mac guy. So if we do Command Option G on these, it will make it a frame. And just like the section, you can name a frame. You can also give it a fill and give it a stroke if you'd like. And the frame has a lot more ability behind it. It gives the ability to clip the content inside of a frame, as well as the ability to scroll inside of a frame. So let's say I reduce it to this. You can still see these outside of it, but they're technically in the frame, as you can see while I move it. If I do clip content, it'll clip it. And if I go over to prototype here and I say that I want it to scroll, that clipped content will show so long as I scroll within the frame. So see, now you can see how that would work with that clipped content. So frames can be useful in trying to make the separate scroll for an element or widget, let's say, inside of a screen that you have. Maybe the whole screen itself has its own higher level scroll, but then you have a table inside of it that you want to have its own vertical and maybe even horizontal scroll tied to that. You might frame it in order to give it that ability. The other thing that frames do is they give the ability to set objects for how they position. Automatically, every object that you frame will just be in left to the top here, but you can change the constraints so that they scale or are tied to other sides of the frame that it's in. So let's say this one, we'll leave it left top. This one will scale, and this is horizontally scale. And let's do also scale vertically. This one we can do right and bottom. And this one, let's do left and right and top and bottom. That left and right and top and bottom is a little confusing because it's similar to scale, but it's going to scale this element inside of this container in order to maintain the exact padding, let's say, on all of these ends. So you can see all these lines here. As I adjust this frame, it's going to try and maintain the exact rules that it started with for the space here, 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 and here. And then you can see the others. This one, since it's stuck to the right and bottom, it'll always keep the same space on the right and the bottom. And then this one we have here is just purely scaling the space around it and the element itself as you update the size and whatnot. So frames, though, it always has sort of an absolute positioning. And then we get over to auto layout. Now, auto layout's the hardest grouping method for folks to get their heads around, but once you do, it's really hard to go back. And you'll want to do auto layout pretty much in every context that you can, because it becomes the most efficient and useful means of organizing or arranging any tables, screens, any of that stuff, any elements really. And it also is much more useful for developer handoff, since a lot of auto layout rules are somewhat similar to how a developer thinks when it comes to containerizing things. I don't think that's a word. I think I just made that up, but making things, all in the same container, having the same rules behind them, and how things should scale and be responsive. Now, with auto layout, one of the big things is that as opposed to any of the other things, like you could see with this frame, how some elements are behind or in front of other elements. With auto layout, once you do auto layout, there is no Z axis. So the layers from top to bottom will not show as top to bottom on the screen. Elements don't go behind or in front of each other anymore because they have to abide by the rules of it lays out from left to right, top to bottom, or it might wrap from left to right and top to bottom, but they can't go behind each other or in front of each other. I'd say the exception to that would be that you can override an element in auto layout by giving it an absolute position. Now, to do auto layout, you can either add it over here, auto layout. Now everything tries to, automatically set itself to auto laying out, or you can do Shift A as the keyboard shortcut. And what it does is it tries to first figure out, it's guessing at what you want. So I had these already stacked in this manner with this padding between elements or gap between elements. So as you can see over here, it's saying it thinks that I want you to give 32 pixels of space between everything, both vertically and horizontally, and that I want you to wrap. If I set it to horizontally layout, it's going to, horizontally lay out. Vertically, here we go from top to bottom. The other thing that auto layout does is, it gives every object a relative position to every other object inside of this container. And those objects can all be set to fixed fill or hug. Depending on the object, I guess. Some objects can't hug because hug is specific to a container. The object has to be a container, or the container itself can hug. For instance, this auto layout container right now over here is hugging vertically, but it's not hugging horizontally. So if I set it to hug, it now hugs everything. But then on top of that, I can add in some padding around it. Maybe I want 8 pixels of padding horizontally, 8 pixels of padding vertically, or a border around it. forgive my terminology that's a little all over the place. I think, what do we call it in Figma? They call it, okay, it's padding. So I'm on the right track here. And then these are gaps. Okay, gaps. And then, yeah, the gaps are still 32 pixels vertically. So you can change it and see it here horizontally. So hug, again, it'll try to hug all of the elements inside of the container you set to hug, factoring in those elements' size, gaps between multiple elements, and padding around those elements. Now, fixed, like it sounds, means that it will not change the size. So, or it will not adjust the elements inside. So if I update the fixed position here, it's going to do this. And you can clip content just like in a frame and set scrolling behavior just like a frame. Fixed for the elements inside of this mean that those elements will not resize at all if you update the size of this. And they're all automatically set to fixed. But if, let's say, I make this yellow one to fill, right now you see it does nothing. But as I resize, it's going to fill so that this container always maintains this 32 pixel gap and this 8 pixel padding between elements. If I did the same fill concept with this one, then both are going to do that rule. So they'll each fill their own equal amount, let's say. So there's a quick glimpse into auto layout and just all the different grouping methods in general for Figma.